I heard her say it before she thought I'd entered the hallway. Old people need less space. She said it lightly, almost musical, the kind of cruelty that hides inside a smile. I froze behind the half-closed door, clutching the teacup I'd meant to bring her. It trembled in my hand, and a thin crack ran down the porcelain like a quiet scream. The house was unusually still that evening. Even the clock in the living room seemed to pause, waiting to see what I'd do. I didn't move. I just listened the way you listen when you realize the kindness you depended on might have been performance all along. Peter's voice came next, low, uneasy. "Emily, please." But she only laughed. "She won't even notice once we move her things. She hardly uses half the room anyway." I stepped back before they could see me, my heart pounding against the old fabric of my nightgown. For a moment, I almost believed it was a misunderstanding, that maybe I'd heard wrong, but when I returned to my storage room and saw the boxes already stacked in the corner, my boxes I knew. Still, I didn't say a word. Not that night. I simply smiled the next morning when she greeted me with her sugary tone, because I already had a plan. And that recording I found later, it shattered everything I thought I knew about my own family. Chapter 1. The room they chose for me. It was Peter who first called it temporary. "Just until we figure out the nursery, Mom," he'd said, his tone wrapped in guilt and avoidance. He couldn't meet my eyes. He never could when he was doing something he knew would hurt me. The word hung there, temporary. But I'd lived long enough to know that in families, temporary often meant permanent once you stop complaining. The room they meant for me wasn't really a room at all. It was the old storage space behind the laundry, low ceiling, one small window, and the faint smell of detergent that never quite left. I'd used it years ago to store my late husband's books, boxes of baby clothes, and the winter quilts I'd sewn before arthritis took my hands. Now those same boxes were piled in corners like ghosts that hadn't figured out where to go. Emily stood in the doorway with her perfectly straight posture, clutching her phone like a badge of authority. "We'll make it cozy, I promise," she said, glancing around as if inspecting the place for future renovations. "Peter will move your dresser down here this weekend, and we can get you one of those foldable beds. They're easier for you, right?" I wanted to ask her easier for who, but I didn't. I just nodded. She smiled, relieved that I hadn't protested. That was the thing about Emily, her kindness always came with terms. When Peter brought the boxes down later, he wouldn't meet my eyes either. "You'll be comfortable here," he said. The words sounded rehearsed. When he left, I ran my fingers along the chipped windowsill and whispered to no one, "I've been comfortable in worse." That night, I lay on the foldable bed and stared at the shadows the hallway light cast through the door crack. Every creak of the house sounded different from here, unfamiliar, hollow. Upstairs, laughter rippled. The kind of laughter you share when you feel at home. For the first time in my own house, I didn't feel at home. I tried to sleep, but the silence pressed down like a second blanket. Then I heard soft footsteps above me, the kind that pause, listen, and then move again. My old bones wanted to believe it was just Peter checking on Ellie, but something about the rhythm, slow, cautious, felt wrong. The following morning, Emily chirped, "Did you sleep well, Mom?" I smiled. Like a baby. She didn't catch the irony, of course. During breakfast, she told Peter she'd scheduled painters to redo my old room. "If we're turning it into a nursery, we should start soon," she said, sipping her coffee like she hadn't just ripped a lifetime of memories out of that room. Peter murmured something about waiting a few weeks. Emily's eyes hardened just slightly before softening again, the kind of switch you only notice when you've lived long enough to spot rehearsed sweetness. After they left for work, I walked up the stairs and stood by the doorway of my old bedroom. The door was half closed, as if the house itself was ashamed. Inside, the wallpaper I'd chosen decades ago, faded lavender vines, was peeling at the corners. My dresser was gone, my quilt folded on a chair like an artifact. In its place sat neatly labeled boxes, baby clothes, toys, storage. My name had vanished from this room, replaced by a future I was clearly not meant to be part of. I touched the old quilt and whispered, "He would have hated this." I meant my husband, Harold. He'd built this home with his own hands, beam by beam, when Peter was just a toddler. Every nail in these walls had been driven in love, and now The woman Peter had chosen was driving me out of it quietly, politely, completely. By afternoon, I tried to busy myself with routine. I ironed napkins no one used, cleaned a spotless kitchen, watered plants that were already green. It's what widows do, we keep our hands busy so our hearts don't speak too loudly. Then something strange happened. As I was wiping the counter, my phone buzzed. It was a notification from the Voice Memos app. A new recording had been saved. I frowned. I hadn't recorded anything. I barely used that app. I pressed play, but only static filled the air, a faint hum, the kind you get when a microphone is turned on accidentally. I shrugged it off, assuming Ellie had pressed something while playing with my phone. But later, when I looked again, the timestamp caught my eye. 1:12 a.m. That was around the same time I'd heard footsteps above my room. A chill slid down my spine, but I dismissed it. At my age, you learn that the mind can play cruel tricks when the heart is tired. Still, something in me felt unsettled, like the air right before a thunderstorm. That evening, when Peter came home, I asked casually, "Did you come downstairs last night?" He hesitated, spoon midair. "No, I was asleep." "Why?" "Nothing," I said softly, and went back to my soup. Emily smiled thinly across the table. "Maybe you were dreaming, Mom." Because when I went back to my room that night, I noticed something I couldn't ignore. My phone was no longer on the bedside table where I'd left it. It was on the floor, face down, its screen faintly glowing. And when I picked it up, there was a second recording. No title, no explanation. Just the quiet breath of someone standing too close to the microphone, and a woman's voice, low and unfamiliar, whispering something I couldn't quite make out. But it sounded eerily like my name. Chapter 2. The Voice in the Dark. I didn't play it right away. The phone sat on my nightstand all night, the soft blue light bleeding through the dark like an unblinking eye. Every time I turned, I felt it, watching me, waiting. At some point, I must have dozed off because when I opened my eyes again, morning light was creeping under the door, and I could hear Emily moving around upstairs, humming that same bright, artificial tune she always did when she wanted to sound busy. My fingers itched toward the phone. I told myself I wouldn't play it, that it was probably nothing. Maybe Ellie had been recording some silly game, or maybe I'd accidentally pressed the record button myself. But curiosity, it's a cruel companion. It whispers when no one else will. So I pressed play. At first, nothing. Just the faint hiss of static and something like wind moving through fabric. I almost laughed, half embarrassed by my own nerves. But then I heard a click, like a door, closing softly. Then, voices. Muffled, low. "She's still awake?" It was Emily. I knew that tone, that clipped whisper she used when she didn't want Peter to disagree. Then Peter's voice followed, quieter, strained. "She'll adjust, Em. Just give her time. She doesn't need time. She needs boundaries. If she keeps insisting that's her room, we'll never move forward." My stomach twisted. There was a pause, and then the unmistakable sound of something sliding like furniture being dragged across a floor. I heard Emily's voice again, closer this time. "We can finish tomorrow. She won't come upstairs tonight. She never does." And then, faintly, as if whispered into the microphone itself, "She'll be gone soon." The sound of my own breath filled the room, shallow, trembling. I hadn't realized I'd been holding it. I replayed it twice, 3 times, just to be sure I wasn't hearing wrong. Each time, that same soft menace in her tone made my skin crawl. "She'll be gone soon." Gone? Gone where? I sat there on the edge of the bed, my heart pounding hard enough to make the phone tremble in my hand. My first thought was denial. Maybe it was about the boxes, the old junk Emily had been nagging Peter to clear out. Maybe she was just talking about that. But the part of me that had lived long enough to recognize malice whispered otherwise. I wanted to confront her, march upstairs, and ask what exactly she meant. But I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I put the phone in my drawer and forced myself to move through the day as though nothing had changed. At breakfast, Emily greeted me with her practiced warmth. "Good morning, Mom. Did you sleep all right in your new space? I smiled, lips tight, like a baby. Her eyes lingered on me for half a second too long, as if she was waiting to see if I'd heard something I shouldn't have. Peter, bless his tired soul, avoided eye contact altogether. Little Ellie tugged on my sleeve. "Grandma, can we bake cookies later?" "Yes, darling," I said softly. "We'll bake your favorite ones." Emily clapped her hands once, too cheerily. "Oh no, not today, sweetheart. Grandma needs to rest. She gets tired easily now." The words hit harder than I expected. It wasn't what she said, it was how she said it. That calm, patronizing tone that made me feel like an old pet everyone was too polite to put down. After they left, I sat by the kitchen window, stirring cold tea and staring at the backyard. The swing Peter built when Ellie was born creaked in the breeze. The house was quiet again, but the quiet didn't feel safe anymore. I opened the drawer and took out the phone. My thumb hovered over the voice memo. Something inside me needed to know if it was still there, if it was real. I pressed play again, but this time, the file was gone. Deleted. The app was empty. Not a trace of it. I checked recently deleted files. Nothing. That's when I realized someone must have gone through my phone. A chill raced down my spine. Had Emily come into my room while I slept? Was that the soft click I'd heard in the night? My first instinct was panic, but it quickly turned into something else, something colder, steadier. I'd spent a lifetime being polite, patient, agreeable, but I hadn't survived 72 years just to be erased quietly in my own home. I decided to test her. When Emily came home that evening, I mentioned casually, "Oh, I must have pressed something on my phone last night. Ended up recording for a bit. Such a silly habit, isn't it?" She froze for a fraction of a second, barely noticeable, but I caught it. Her smile tightened. "Oh? What did you record?" "Nothing interesting," I said lightly. "Just voices." That was when she laughed. But it wasn't laughter. It was control wearing perfume. "Maybe you were dreaming again, Mom." I tilted my head. Maybe. That night, I locked my door for the first time. I hadn't done that in years. The air in the little storage room felt heavy, the kind of heavy that smells like dust and secrets. I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about her whisper. "She'll be gone soon." Was it just bitterness, or did she mean something else entirely? Around midnight, I heard footsteps again, soft, deliberate. This time, they stopped right outside my door. I held my breath. A faint creak, then silence, and then a knock. Just once. Slow. Measured. I didn't move. After a minute, the footsteps retreated. When I finally dared to look at my phone, I noticed the screen flashing again. A new notification from voice memos. New recording, untitled, 12:07 a.m. My hands trembled as I reached for it, but I didn't press play. Not yet. Because some truths, I realized, reveal themselves only when you're ready to lose everything that made you feel safe. And I wasn't ready. Not yet. But I knew one thing for certain: whatever was happening in that house, whatever Emily thought she was planning, it had already begun. Chapter 3: Shadows of Doubt. The days that followed bled together like spilled ink, one long, heavy smear of silence. I told myself I was fine, that I'd imagined the whispers, the footsteps, even the recording, that it was grief or exhaustion or the loneliness that wraps around widows like a second skin. But deep down, I knew what I'd heard. Still, pretending was easier. Pretending let me breathe. I baked. I cleaned. I watered the hydrangeas outside, though winter was close enough to bite. But beneath the rhythm of routine, something ugly hummed, like a mosquito in a dark room, just out of reach. The phone never left my pocket now. I charged it beside my bed, not in the kitchen where Emily could reach it. And every night, before sleeping, I checked that my door was locked and the blinds were closed. The house didn't sound the same anymore. It used to sigh a warm, tired sound. But now it watched. Every floorboard groan felt like a question. What did you hear? What do you know? On Tuesday morning, I went to make tea and noticed the sugar jar was missing. Not a big deal, I told myself. Maybe Emily had moved it. But then, later, I saw one of my framed photographs, the one of me and Peter when he was 5, was gone from the hallway. In its place was a new family photo, Emily, Peter, and little Ellie, smiling under a sky so blue it almost looked fake. I stared at it for a long time. My son's hand rested on his wife's shoulder, not mine. My heart thudded once, like a warning. When Emily came home that evening, I asked about the picture. "Oh," she said, feigning surprise. "I just thought we'd update the wall a bit. Fresh energy, you know." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. I nodded. "Of course." She tilted her head, voice soft. "You don't mind, do you?" I forced a laugh. Why would I? But as I turned away, I caught her reflection in the window, that small, satisfied smirk she thought I wouldn't notice. That night, I dreamed of doors closing, one after another. My hands couldn't reach the knobs fast enough. When I woke, my pillow was damp with tears. I didn't remember crying. The next morning, I found something strange. A folded note had been slid under my door. "Forgot to close the back gate again. Be careful next time." No name. Just that line, written in tidy, unfamiliar handwriting. I hadn't gone near the gate in weeks, and when I looked outside, the gate was open, swinging lazily in the wind. I shut it, my heart knocking against my ribs. Someone had been outside, watching. At lunch, I told Peter about the note. He frowned. "Mom, you probably just wrote it yourself and forgot. You've been distracted lately." Emily pressed a gentle hand to his arm. "She's been under a lot of stress, Peter. Let's not overwhelm her." There it was again, that syrupy voice she used when she wanted to paint me fragile. I stared at her, searching her face for even a flicker of guilt. But Emily was born for theater. "I didn't write it," I said quietly. Emily smiled, almost pitying. "Of course not, Mom. Maybe the wind blew it in." "The wind doesn't know my gate," I replied. Her lips twitched. For just a moment, her mask slipped and I saw irritation, maybe even fear, but she quickly hid it under that polished grin. After lunch, she insisted I take a nap. I pretended to. Instead, I listened. The house hummed with their footsteps, Peter's heavy, hers light and deliberate. Cabinets opened, drawers closed. The sound of whispered conversation drifted through the floorboards. I couldn't make out words, just tones, his uncertain, hers commanding. Then came the soft sound of a phone vibrating on wood, a pause, and her voice, sharper now. "She'll start forgetting things soon. It's already happening." I froze. Was she talking about me? That night I checked my phone again. No new recordings. But something else caught my eye. My deleted files folder had been emptied, completely. I hadn't done that. My heart began to race. Either someone was sneaking into my room again, or I was losing track of my own actions. Both possibilities terrified me. The next morning, I decided to test my sanity. I placed a folded napkin just inside the door frame before leaving for a walk. When I returned an hour later, the napkin was gone. I found it later, neatly folded on my pillow. No note, no explanation. Just quiet proof that someone had been there. I sat down, trembling. The mind, when it doubts itself, is the cruelest enemy. Was I being manipulated or simply unraveling? That night, as I sat knitting under the weak glow of the lamp, Emily came in without knocking. She stood there, her perfume too strong, her smile too practiced. "How are you feeling, Mom?" "Fine," I said. She walked over and touched the back of my chair lightly, her fingers brushing the wood. "You know, if you ever feel unsafe, you can always talk to me." I looked up at her. "Unsafe?" She shrugged. "Just saying. You've been locking your door at night. Peter mentioned it. Makes the house feel tense." "I like my privacy," I said. Her smile deepened. "Of course." She turned to leave, then paused at the doorway. "By the way," she said, glancing back, "if you hear noises again, don't worry. Houses like this creak more when they're old." When they're old. The words landed heavier than they should have. After she left, I sat in the stillness for what felt like hours. Every sound of the house felt amplified. The hum of the fridge, the soft rattle of pipes, the whisper of wind against the siding. And then, almost too faint to notice, a small vibration on the nightstand. My phone. A new notification. Voice memo saved untitled. 11:48 p.m. My breath caught. Slowly, I reached for it. And when I pressed play, the first thing I heard was Emily's voice, low, confident, and far too close. "Tomorrow," she whispered. "We start moving her things out for good." Chapter 4, the second recording. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard her voice clear as glass, whispering, "Tomorrow, we start moving her things out for good." The words looped inside my skull like a curse that wouldn't let go. By dawn, I was sitting on the edge of my bed, the phone in my hands, replaying the recording again and again. No static this time, no distortion, just Emily confident, composed, plotting. My body trembled, but not from fear, from anger. All these months of quiet disrespect, all those little accidents, my missing photographs, my moved belongings, the way she'd slowly rewritten my place in this house, it wasn't forgetfulness or convenience. It was preparation. They were getting rid of me. The door creaked open suddenly. I hid the phone under my blanket. "Mom?" Peter's voice was soft, cautious. "You're up early." "I couldn't sleep," I said, forcing calm. He smiled weakly. "Emily's planning to move some of your things today just to make more space in the hallway. Don't worry, we'll keep everything safe." Safe. That word had lost its meaning in this house. When he left, I sat in silence for a long time, clutching my robe tightly around me. I thought of Harold, how he'd built these walls, how he'd told me this home would protect me long after he was gone. I wondered if he'd have recognized the woman our son married. And then, for the first time in years, I did something I hadn't done since Harold's funeral. I called Martin. He was my husband's lawyer and our oldest friend, the kind of man who still sent Christmas cards and addressed them by hand. When he answered, his voice cracked with warmth. "Good Lord, Helen, it's been too long. How are you?" I hesitated. "I'm not sure." He heard the tremor in my voice. "What's happened? Can you come by? Discreetly. Please." He didn't ask questions. "I'll be there before lunch." I hid the phone under my pillow and went about the morning pretending everything was fine. Emily was in a cheerful mood, that kind of exaggerated joy people wear when they're hiding something. She'd cleared half the hallway already, stacking boxes labeled basement, old clothes, and mom stuff. When Martin arrived, Emily's smile faltered for the first time. "Oh, Mr. Brooks, what a surprise!" He greeted her politely, but with just enough authority to make her uncomfortable. "I'm here to review some of Harold's old documents for tax purposes," he said smoothly. "Peter asked me to drop by." Peter looked confused, but nodded anyway. Emily smiled again, too quickly. "Of course. Let me know if you need anything." The moment she left the room, Martin leaned in. "Tell me everything." I took out my phone and played the recording. He listened without interruption, his expression darkening with each passing second. When it ended, he exhaled sharply. "That's deliberate, Helen. She's planning to evict you. And if she's as cunning as she sounds, she's probably preparing legal paperwork behind your back." My throat went dry. "But the house, it's Peter's, isn't it?" Martin gave me a strange look. "No. Harold's final will left everything to you until your passing. Peter inherits after that." I felt my heart lurch. "That's not what they told me." "Then someone lied," he said flatly, "and forged a copy." The air seemed to thin around me. My knees trembled, and Martin caught my arm gently. "Helen, listen to me. You're not powerless. We'll find the original documents." I kept duplicates of Harold's estate file. If what you're saying is true, Emily's tampered with something very serious. A strange calm settled over me, the kind that comes right before a storm. When Emily reappeared with her perfect smile, Martin slipped easily back into his polite facade. "Lovely home you've kept," he said, scanning the walls. "Though I must say, it looks a bit emptier than I remember." Emily laughed lightly. "Just decluttering. You know how elders can hoard things." Martin's eyes flicked toward me, unreadable. "Ah, yes, of course." After he left, I watched from the window as his car disappeared down the street. My heart beat slower now, steadier. For the first time in weeks, I felt something other than fear, purpose. But peace never lasts long in this house. That evening, Emily confronted me. Why was Martin here? I met her eyes. He dropped by to check on Harold's will. Her expression tightened for a split second before she forced a laugh. You must be mistaken, Mom. Peter already handled all that. I tilted my head. Then why do you look so nervous? The silence that followed was delicious. She recovered quickly. Of course she always did. You really shouldn't stress yourself over old paperwork. You know how confusing things can get at your age. I smiled. I remember more than you think. That night I found another recording waiting on my phone. No notification this time. It was hidden deep in the files, almost as if someone didn't want me to find it. When I pressed play, I heard Emily's voice again, but not whispering this time. She was speaking to someone. Her tone was sharp, businesslike. She won't fight it, she said. She's losing track of things already. Once we have the transfer signed, it's done. Then a man's voice muffled, unfamiliar. You're sure she won't see the real will? Emily laughed softly. She can barely work her phone. I stared at the screen, my reflection trembling in the glass. Barely work my phone. I smiled, then the kind of smile Harold used to call dangerous. Because now I had proof. Chapter 5. The confrontation. I waited until dinner. Not because I wanted drama, but because I wanted an audience. Peter, Emily, and little Ellie, the whole perfect picture gathered around the polished oak table, the one Harold had built with his own hands 40 years ago. I'd made stew, the way Harold liked it, simple, honest, with rosemary and patience. The smell filled the kitchen, warm and deceitfully normal. Emily chatted as usual, all smiles and perfect timing. Mom, you've really outdone yourself tonight. We should have you cook more often. I smiled. I won't be here much longer. The spoon froze halfway to her lips. What do you mean? I set my napkin down carefully. You'll see. Peter looked up, confused. Mom? I reached into the pocket of my cardigan, pulled out my phone, and placed it gently on the table. I found something interesting today. Emily's face didn't move, but her hand tightened around her glass. I tapped the screen. A familiar sound filled the air, static, then Emily's voice, cold and clear. She won't fight it. She's losing track of things already. Once we have the transfer signed, it's done. The words hung in the air like smoke that refused to fade. Peter blinked. What is that? Emily laughed too quickly, her pitch too high. That's ridiculous. That's edited. You know how these apps glitch sometimes. I cut her off, my tone steady. It's not edited. It's your voice. And I'm old, Emily, not stupid. Peter turned to her slowly, confusion giving way to dread. Emily, what's she talking about? Her mask cracked. Peter, it's nothing. Just a misunderstanding. I was talking about the garage storage. The garage doesn't have a will attached to it, I said softly. Silence. For a moment, the only sound was the ticking of the kitchen clock, deliberate, accusatory. Then Emily's voice turned sharp, her words laced with venom. You went through my things, didn't you? You've been snooping around like a paranoid old... Careful, I said, my voice low. You're speaking to the woman who owns this house. Her head snapped up. What? I smiled faintly. Martin stopped by today. We found the original will. Harold left everything to me until my death. This house, the land, the accounts. You forged a fake one, didn't you? Peter's chair scraped back. Forged? Emily, tell me she's lying. Emily's lips parted, then closed. Her eyes darted toward the doorway, toward escape. Peter's voice broke. Emily? I did it for us, she snapped finally, the words tumbling out like stones. Do you know how long we've lived under her shadow? Everything in this house? Still screams of her. You never grew up, Peter. You just kept living in your parents' home. The room went dead quiet. Peter looked as if she'd slapped him. Ellie, sensing something terrible, clutched her stuffed rabbit and whispered, Daddy. Emily's breath quickened. I wanted a life that wasn't secondhand, Peter. We could have sold this place, started fresh. With my mother on the street?" he whispered. I watched her crumble, not loudly, but quietly, like a curtain falling after the last line of a tragic play. She sank back into her chair, her eyes glittering with rage. "You think you've won?" she hissed at me. "You're just delaying the inevitable. You're old, Helen. Sooner or later, this house will be mine." I leaned forward, resting my trembling hands on the table. "Maybe, but by then, you'll be long gone." Her face went pale. "What do you mean?" "I mean," I said evenly, "Martin also called the notary. The forgery you made, it's a crime, a rather serious one. There's a police report being filed as we speak." She went still. The color drained from her lips. Peter buried his face in his hands. "Oh God. Emily." I stood slowly. My knees ached, but I'd never felt taller. "You said old people need less space. You were right. I don't need this house to feel safe. I just need the truth." Emily pushed back her chair, eyes blazing. "You think anyone will believe you?" "Everyone knows your mind's slipping." I smiled again, colder this time. "Maybe. But they'll believe a lawyer. And they'll believe the recordings. I sent them to Martin this afternoon." Her expression shattered. The control she'd worn like jewelry finally broke, leaving behind something raw and furious. "You conniving old witch," she whispered. I reached for my tea and took a sip, unbothered. "You shouldn't have underestimated me." Peter stood. "Emily, I think you should. Leave." She stared at him, wide-eyed. "Peter. Now." For a moment I thought she might argue, scream, throw something. But instead, she just glared at me with a look I'll never forget, the kind that promises revenge, but knows it's already too late. She grabbed her coat, slammed the door, and the echo lingered long after she was gone. Peter turned to me, tears in his eyes. "Mom, I didn't know. I swear I didn't." I touched his arm gently. "I know, son. Sometimes the people we love teach us lessons we never wanted to learn." We sat in silence for a while, mother and son, surrounded by the ghosts of a home almost lost. The clock ticked on, unhurried, as if time itself approved. That night, as I lay in bed, I finally felt the house breathe again, steady, warm, alive. But just as sleep began to claim me, my phone buzzed once. A new voice memo, untitled. When I opened it, I expected silence, but instead, I heard a faint sound, the creak of the front door, and a woman's voice whispering, barely audible, "You haven't seen the last of me." Chapter 6. The revelation morning came gray and close, as if the sky itself had been listening at our windows all night. Peter brewed coffee without speaking. The clink of the spoon against the mug sounded like regret. I wrapped my robe tighter and watched steam curl from the kettle, wondering how many times I had poured warmth into a house that kept turning cold. Martin arrived just after 9 with a weathered briefcase and the expression of a man who had outlived many illusions. He greeted me with a careful smile and nodded to Peter, who looked 10 years older than yesterday. We sat at the dining table, Harold's table, and the old wood seemed to square its shoulders. "I brought copies," Martin said, tapping the case. "And something else I think you should see." He laid out the papers with a ritual's precision. Harold's final will, notarized, a codicil signed the spring after his surgery, the trust schedule listing accounts, and finally, a letter in Harold's handwriting, sealed and dated for me. Peter's breath hitched. "Dad, wrote you?" "For when the house feels loud without me," the envelope said in his tidy block letters. My hands shook. I broke the seal as gently as you lift a sleeping child. "Len." It began the name only he used. "If you're reading this, the quiet has turned heavy. I know you. You'll fill it with chores and kindness you don't owe anyone. Don't. Live in the house like it still recognizes your laugh. I arranged the papers so you won't have to bargain for your own front door. If anyone tries to move you, show them this. And remember, I trust you to be stubborn when it matters." The words steadied me. The years folded in on themselves our first winter here, the way he hung the quilt rail, his habit of humming when he measured trim. The home wasn't a possession, it was a promise he'd left me. Martin slid the forged will across the table next Emily's version. Side by side, the differences glared. a signature traced but wrong in the loops, a date that didn't match hospital records, a witness who had since moved out of state. Classic splice job, Martin said. Page 2 is lifted from a template. Page 4 uses a different font. Sloppy, if you know where to look. Peter rubbed his temples. How did I miss this? Love makes poor proofreaders, Martin said gently, and she worked in confidence, not evidence. We moved from documents to movements, phone logs, email fragments. A notary's message on record confirming a lost original Emily had sworn existed. Then the small things I'd noticed: photos switched, doors locked, the napkin test, the half-heard conversations snapped into sequence like a zipper closing. It wasn't random meanness, it was staging. The plan wasn't just to shrink my room, it was to shrink me, until I fit inside whatever story made the sale easiest. Peter stared at the tabletop. She told me we needed liquidity, that the market was good, that you were lonely here and would be happier in a community. He swallowed. I wanted to believe her. I put my hand over his. Believing a marriage is not the same as betraying your mother, I said, but it can become that if you stop asking questions. Martin cleared his throat. There's more. He opened his phone and turned the screen to us. An email thread Emily had with a realtor, dated last week. Off-market showing possible. Older occupant will be relocated to assisted living within the month. I felt the words like cold rain down my back. She'd already scheduled the photographer, Martin said. And a clean-out service for the garage. I pictured my quilts, Harold's tools, the tin box of little boy teeth I could never throw away. In their calendar we were debris. Police? Peter asked, voice dull. Paper trail first, Martin said. We filed to record the will and codicil with the county today. I'll submit a fraud report regarding the forgery and contact the notary who was misled. We'll also deliver a formal notice to Emily to preserve evidence on her devices, text, recordings, anything. If she deletes now, it looks worse for her. The word recordings pulled my eyes to the hallway. The house had begun to keep its own diary. Late-night steps. Whispers bled into a microphone, my name pronounced like a problem. I took out my phone. There's one more from last night, I said softly. She came back. I tapped play. Creak. Door. The silk smile voice, stripped now to wire and teeth. You haven't seen the last of me. Peter flinched. Martin didn't. He simply asked, May I forward this? I nodded. He sent it to himself and to a cloud folder labeled Dalton Estate Evidence. When he slid the phone back, my reflection looked older than yesterday and braver than last year. We broke for tea. Grief walked in with the steam. I found myself telling Martin things I hadn't said aloud since Harold died. How winter had taught me to choose light at 4 p.m. How a house sinks a little when the last pair of boots leaves the mat. How you can be surrounded by family and still be misplaced. Your kindness wasn't the mistake, Martin said. Your silence was. His eyes were kind, not soft. You corrected that. Peter stood and began to pace, then stopped in front of Harold's framed photograph. Dad, he whispered, so quietly I almost didn't hear it. It wasn't an apology to the dead. It was permission to the living. The doorbell rang. For a breath, we all froze. But it was only the courier Martin had called. Certified envelopes, signature tabs. We executed the filings like a rite. Each page I signed felt like a fence post driven into ground that wanted to slide. When the last seal was pressed, Martin exhaled. You're protected. Civil and criminal remedies are in motion. If she pushes, the courts will push back. What about Ellie? I asked. My granddaughter's laugh floated down the stairs in my memory, sticky with jam and summer. The cost of justice has always been paid in someone's childhood. We don't punish a child for an adult's panic, I said more to myself than to them. We set a boundary and we keep a door open. Peter nodded, eyes wet. I'll take Ellie to my sister's for a few days. Emily can calm down somewhere that isn't this house. Good, Martin said, and change the locks. I looked around the room. The lavender wallpaper in my old bedroom still clung in curling corners. The swing Harold hung out back squeaked in a small breeze. Even the radiator sounded relieved. Martin, I said, when can we tell it all? Soon, he said. But first document, duplicate, distribute. I'll leave copies with you and store backups off-site. By the time she thinks to fight, the truth will have more legs than her lies." I walked him to the door. He squeezed my hand. "Stubborn when it matters," he said, echoing Harold's letter. And I laughed, watery and astonished. After he left, I stood alone in the foyer. The house felt different, lighter, yes, but also more honest. It no longer pretended we were a family gathered by love instead of convenience. It stood with me the way a witness stands, clear, unsentimental, unavoidable. I went to the storage room, my room, for now, and folded the quilt over my arm. I carried it upstairs, back to the lavender walls, and spread it across the bed with the slow care of a crown returned to its rightful headboard. Then I called the locksmith. As the drill hummed and the old cylinder loosened, I understood it. The quiet I had lived in wasn't peace. It was suppression. Truth, when it arrives, is noisier than you expect. Stamps on envelopes, metal on metal, the resolute scrape of a chair pulled to the center of the room. By sunset, the new keys lay warm in my palm. I closed my fingers around them and felt Harold's promise settle like a hand at my back. I would expose her, not with fury, but with light. Not to humiliate, but to end the rehearsal she'd mistaken for ownership. Tomorrow, we'd stop whispering and start recording on paper, in court, in voices that didn't shake. And if she returned to test the locks, she'd learn what my husband already knew. I am gentle until I am not. Chapter 7. The Reckoning. The morning of the hearing came with rain, soft but steady, washing dust from the porch railings. I stood by the window, keys in hand, and realized the house was breathing again. It creaked in the old, familiar way, the way it used to when Harold was alive and late for breakfast. Peter arrived first, tie crooked, eyes heavy from a night of little sleep. "She'll be there," he said quietly. "Her lawyer filed a statement at the last minute." "I expected as much," I told him. "Some people fight even when they've already lost the truth." The courthouse was small, the kind that still smelled of old varnish and patience. Inside, everything was gray. The floor tiles, the suits, even the air. Yet somehow I felt calmer than I had in months. My hands didn't tremble as I clutched my folder. I'd already shaken enough. Emily sat across the aisle, her composure a shade too perfect. The pearl earrings, the controlled smile armor masquerading as grace. When our eyes met, something flickered in hers, something between defiance and fear. Martin leaned toward me. "Let the papers speak, Helen. The truth doesn't need a performance." So I did. When the judge called our case, I rose slowly. Martin spoke for me, his voice even and exact. He presented Harold's original will, first signed, sealed, witnessed. Then the forged copy Emily had used to claim ownership. Every mismatch, every falsified line was read aloud in the quiet rhythm of accountability. For once, I didn't look at Emily. I looked at Peter, whose face was a study in heartbreak. The judge asked if I wished to add anything. My throat ached, but I stood anyway. "Your Honor," I said, "this house was never about money. It was built by hands that believed in belonging. I only wanted to stay in the place where my memories fit the walls." The courtroom was silent. Even the clerk stopped typing. Emily's lawyer tried to recover the moment, speaking of misunderstandings and miscommunication, but the evidence had weight, and the air around it was final. The judge's ruling was simple. The forged documents were invalid, the property and assets restored to my name, and the matter of fraud referred to further review. It wasn't triumph, I felt it was quiet relief. Outside, under the courthouse awning, Peter stood beside me. "I don't know how to fix this," he said. "You start small," I told him. "You tell Ellie stories that make her proud of her father's honesty. You remind her that home isn't something you inherit, it's something you earn back." He nodded, eyes wet, then went to make a call to his sister, to arrange a place for Ellie for a while. Martin touched my shoulder. "It's done. She'll face consequences, but you can decide how much of her shadow stays in your light." I looked at the rain streaking down the courthouse steps. I think it's time to let the house dry in peace. When I returned that afternoon, the scent of damp earth followed me inside. The radiator clicked back to life as if the house were exhaling. I walked through each room slowly, running my hand along the furniture, whispering thanks under my breath. Not to luck, not even to justice but to endurance. Peter came later with Ellie. The little girl ran into my arms, chattering about rain puddles and cookies. I laughed for the first time in what felt like years. "Grandma," she said suddenly, serious now, "is the house happy again?" I thought about it. The new locks, the open curtains, the silence that no longer listened to whispers. "Yes," I said softly. "The house remembers who it belongs to." That evening, we ate simple food, soup, bread, and a kind of peace. After Ellie went to bed, Peter helped me box up a few things that weren't mine to carry anymore. The duplicate keys, the legal folders, the spare bitterness. We stacked them neatly by the door for Martin to collect in the morning. When Peter left, I walked him to the porch. "She'll find her own way," I said. "People always do, once the lies run out of room." He hugged me tightly. "You always were the strongest person I know." "No," I said, smiling, "just the most patient." Later, alone, I sat by the window with my tea and listened to the soft hum of the refrigerator, the rain easing off the refrigerator. Eaves. My phone buzzed once a message from Martin confirming the filings were complete. No new voice memos this time. I opened the recordings folder anyway. For a moment, I hovered over the files, then deleted them all. Some truths are meant to be kept, others deserve rest. I placed the phone face down and looked out at the yard. The swing Harold built swayed gently in the wind. I could almost hear his voice steady, amused. "Stubborn when it matters, Len." I smiled, whispered back, "Always." The clock ticked toward midnight, calm and even. For the first time in months, the house didn't sound like it was waiting for anything. It was simply living like me on the other side of fear, and though I would never say it out loud, part of me knew this wasn't the end. It was the quiet after the storm, the place where forgiveness begins its slow, patient work. Chapter 8. The Quiet After the Storm. Morning light pooled through the curtains, soft and gold, touching the furniture like it was greeting an old friend. The rain had washed everything, cleaned the windows, the walk, even the weary corners of my heart. For the first time in months, I didn't wake to footsteps or whispers, only birdsong, only quiet. I brewed tea slowly, the way Harold taught me. Water first, then leaves, never the other way around. The kitchen filled with warmth. The house no longer felt like a witness. It felt like it had forgiven us all for the noise we'd made in our fear. Peter and Ellie came by mid-morning. They left their coats by the door, laughing as the little one ran straight to the swing outside. She squealed as the wind caught her, the sound so bright it made the walls hum. I stood in the doorway watching them, the light flickering across their faces, and I realized something simple but profound. Home is not just where you stay. It's where you are still wanted. Peter joined me on the porch steps. "You sure you'll be all right here alone for a while?" he asked. I nodded. "I was alone before. The difference now is that I'm not afraid of it." He smiled, a little sad but mostly proud. "Ellie wants to come every Sunday." "Tell her to bring cookies," I said, and we both laughed. When they left, the silence returned, but it wasn't heavy anymore. It was companionable. I moved through the rooms, touching the walls, the door frames, the things that had survived us. I dusted the photograph of Harold in the hall, his grin frozen mid-laugh, the carpenter's pencil tucked behind his ear. "You were right," I whispered. "Being stubborn does matter." In the afternoon, I sat by the window with my knitting. The rhythm steadied me, loop, pull, release. The phone lay beside me, dark and still. I hadn't opened the recorder since the courthouse, but curiosity flickered, soft as a candle flame. I unlocked it. No new files. Just one I had missed, a fragment saved automatically weeks ago, back when everything was chaos. I hesitated, then pressed play. Static, then Harold's voice. Or something close to it, a voicemail from years ago, before he passed. "Len, don't forget to check the back door latch. It's sticking again. And don't let Peter talk you into giving up your garden. You belong there." I let the sound wrap around me. His voice, simple and ordinary, felt like a benediction. When it ended, I didn't cry. I just smiled and saved it under a new name, home. The afternoon faded into a peach-colored dusk. The world outside was gentle again, washed clean. I made one more cup of tea, the kind that tastes like closure, and sat by the table Harold built. The grain of the wood glowed in the light. Tomorrow, I'd open the windows. Maybe paint the spare room. Maybe plant something new by the porch, something that takes root quietly and refuses to die easily. As the sun slipped behind the hill, I caught my reflection in the window. For a long time, I didn't see the wrinkles or the gray. I saw the woman who had learned to stop apologizing for her own survival. I turned off the lights and headed to bed. Just as I pulled the blanket over my knees, my phone buzzed once, just a message from Peter saying, "Good night, Mom." But for a second, my heart skipped the way it used to. I smiled at my own nerves. Old habits die slow. Still, I reached for the phone, just to make sure. Nothing unusual, no new recording. But I kept the phone beside me anyway. Not from fear, just from memory. Some stories leave echoes, and some echoes are worth listening to. The house sighed once, the kind of sigh that sounds almost like gratitude. I closed my eyes, the rain starting again outside, soft, familiar. Now, every time my phone buzzes at night, I still listen, just in case. Some truths don't come crashing through the door. They arrive quietly, like dawn slipping under the curtains. For me, it wasn't about winning. It was about remembering who I was before the whispers, before the boxes, before fear made my world small. The house is still old, so am I. But both of us have learned that peace isn't silence, it's safety earned. And when the walls creak at night, I don't listen for danger anymore. I listen for proof that we're still standing. If this story moved you, subscribe to Twisted Ties for more stories that twist the truth, the heart, and everything in between.